Good evening. We're back with more Marvel Snap, and this evening we're going to update the Marvel Snap Series 4 and Series 5 tier list. There have been significant changes to the meta since the last time I did a tier list for Marvel Snap, so we will take a look at the old list and move some cards around and add the new cards to the tier list as well, and give buying recommendations. So let's get started. We will start with the cards that have not been added to the tier list yet. First up will be Sebastian Shaw. And Sebastian Shaw is going in the high B, low A tier. He's pretty solid. Silver Surfer is not in that great a spot in the meta right now. It's like a B tier or maybe low A tier deck. We could put him in low A tier, but it'd be very low A tier. He is a solid power card, but he has been outclassed significantly in the meta. He really doesn't have the power to go over the top of like Blob or She-Hulk Infinite or Black Knight, so he's good, but not great. And I don't really recommend spending tokens on him right now, unless you've already picked up every other relevant card. Blob is a very solid S tier card. He's going pretty high up the S tier. Blob's in a really good spot at the moment. I do kind of expect that he'll get nerfed at some point, which means that you should be cautious about buying him and expecting that he will stay as he is forever. As with Miss Marvel, I expect that he will be nerfed at some point. We will have a patch coming in the morning. It is currently the evening of January the 9th. And we'll take that patch into account with the tier list recommendations here. But Blob hasn't been touched yet, and so as of right now, he's a very high S tier card. Very popular in the meta, well worth picking up with tokens or eventually Spotlight keys when he becomes available. But he may change in the future, and we'll keep an eye on that. He's a pretty strong candidate for a change. Next up, we got Havoc. There's one or two decks that Havoc fits in, but he's really not very good at all. I would rank him in the D tier. Pretty low down, pretty low priority buy. I've seen him featured in a Mr. Negative deck or two. Tried out in Bounce. He's really not essential in either of those decks, and not a card that you really build around, so he's not a recommended card to pick up. Selene is somewhat similar, very niche card, very unnecessary card to have, especially since her best deck is the Bounce Annihilus deck, and Annihilus is getting nerfed tomorrow from a 5/7 to a 5/5, and also he's losing the ability to send 0 cost or 0 power cards over to the opponent. So Selene is also going to be ranked pretty low. We'll put her in the very low C, maybe high D tier. She's really not in a very good spot right now because Bounce is not in a very good spot after the nerfs of Viper, and then Annihilus is getting nerfed tomorrow. And the developers are making it pretty clear they don't like the junk style deck that tries to send junk cards over to the opponent's side of the board, and that's Selene's deck. So Selene's not in a very good spot right now, and I really wouldn't recommend picking her up. Scar, very solid A tier card. Just released as the Battle Pass card for this month. Any card that can reduce its own cost by at least 2, Scar gets down to a 4/11 pretty easy. Very solid card. He can get down to a 2/11 even, sometimes, not very often. But he's going to have a place in the meta for a long time as a very solid card. Not really an essential S tier card, but a very solid A tier card. Provides easy power. And last we have Kyra, who is, in my opinion, a top 5 card in the game at the moment. Based on her stats, which are very, very solid. And she doesn't do anything flashy. She's a defensive card. But she increases that cube rate and that win rate by a couple of percent. by protecting your cards primarily against Shang-Chi, but also against Killmonger. As a result, Destroy has dropped out of the meta quite a bit, since Destroy really needed Killmonger to be effective. And so we're really not seeing much Destroy. She's changed the meta. Very solid card, available in Spotlight caches right now. Well worth picking up if you have the keys and you don't have High Evolutionary or Nebula, who are the other cards in the Spotlight cache. Very good card. So let's go over the cards that we've already ranked and see if we want to change their positions. We'll start with the F tier and work our way up. Howard the Duck, unchanged. My opinion of Howard the Duck has not changed since the last tier. Martyr has increased to a 1/5. And as a result, I would say we could move Martyr up a little bit, maybe low D tier, but still not a good card and not a card that you want to spend tokens on or Spotlight keys. Spider-Man 2055 or 2095, 2099. He's unchanged. Still not worth buying. Kang the Conqueror has been unchanged. It remains one of my favorite cards to play, but I cannot recommend that anybody pick him up. It's not really featured in any popular meta deck. And it's a pretty high skill ceiling card, to be honest. There's room for outplays with that card. But he doesn't feature in any popular deck, and I can't really recommend spending 6k tokens on him when you could pick up a card like Ms. Marvel or Kyra or Blob. Master Mold. Master Mold has improved a little bit with the Ronin buff. We can move him up to the C tier. Say he's in a better spot than Selene, Elsa, Lady Deathstrike. Maybe even better than like Hitmonkey or Silver Samurai, because he does feature in a relatively strong deck. The Ronin ongoing deck isn't bad. So his place has improved in the meta with the Ronin buff. Nimrod has not changed. He's not going to move. He does have a place in I would say an A tier, maybe a B plus tier deck. That's the Phoenix Force deck. So we could move him up to the C tier as a result. He'll be mid to low C tier, but we can move him up. Living Tribunal now features pretty prominently in a couple of meta decks, and as a result it's moving up from the D tier all the way up to A. I might even put it low S. It's a pretty essential card for a few different decks. With Kyra entering the meta, she protects the Blob so that you can play like a ramp Blob Living Tribunal deck. And then there's also a one that's based around ongoing effects like Iron Man and Onslaught. That does pretty well on the meta, and you see it pretty often in the top 50 ranks. So Living Tribunal's place has improved quite a bit, and may even be next on the list of cards that I'm going to pick up with tokens. We'll see. May even end up low S tier when all is said and done with this list. Jean Grey really not seen in any decks. I want Jean Grey as a card to experiment with. There was one deck featured by a streamer that was doing okay. She could be C tier, I suppose, but I think I'm fine with her in the D tier. We'll leave her there. For the time being, you really almost never see Jean Grey, and there's pretty good reasons for that. Elsa has been nerfed since my last tier list. She's going to drop down to the D tier. Not recommended for anybody to pick her up at the moment. She's pretty bad. Lady Deathstrike, not really featured in any meta deck at the moment. Also going to drop down to the D tier. I would say even lower than Havoc. She's really never seen. Gladiator has been buffed since the last tier list and is now a solid A tier card with 3/8 stats. It's seen pretty often coming out of that 3 slot. I'd say he's relatively low in the A tier, maybe higher than Sebastian Shaw, but it's certainly not a high priority buy. And in fact, now that I think about it, you could probably make a case for high B tier. He's not an essential card. But he does have a place in one of the best decks in the meta right now, which is a Black Knight deck. Hit Monkey remains where he is, still not a very good card. Silver Samurai remains where he is, not featured very often, though when Meek enters the meta in a week or two, we'll see if discard gets better and maybe we see more Silver Samurai. Stegron has been buffed up to a 4/6. I would put him in the low B tier. I think that does improve him a little bit, though now he won't be played in Cerebro 5s. However, now that I think of it, the cards that are dropping from Series 4 to Series 3 soon, actually tomorrow, those should be down in the F tier. Do not buy because they're going to be in the Series 3 soon. Those cards would be Master Mold. Let's move Master Mold down. Spider-Man 2099 already down there. Negasonic, Stature, and Stegron. All of these are do not buys, not because they're bad, but because they will be in Series 4 soon, Series 3 soon, so let's just put them down there. That'll happen tomorrow before anybody will really see this video. But so we'll just stick them down there for now, out of the way. Ghost Spider. Ghost Spider's staying where she is. Nothing's really changed with Ghost Spider. Black Knight has improved significantly up to the S tier. He's now featured in one of the best decks in the game. I'll evaluate later where in the S tier he's going to go. He's going to go higher than the low S tier, but we'll move some other cards around and then we'll make our final assessments. Mobius, I think Mobius can move up the B tier a bit. He is seen as a counter to Wave, or a counter to Loki, but Loki's going to be dropping out of the meta tomorrow. So, Mobius, he's not bad. I think he belongs high B tier, but not much better than that. Echo's place has improved as well. We can move Echo up to high B tier. Because Miss Marvel is so strong, Echo is used as a counter to Miss Marvel mid tier. After Miss Marvel gets nerfed tomorrow, though, I think Echo will drop down a little bit. Galactus, we're seeing more Galactus lately. I think Galactus moves up the B tier a bit. He's never really going to be a super strong deck, or if he does ever get strong again, the developers are going to nerf him. Because I think they've said they don't really want Galactus to be that strong, so he's probably just going to sit in this B tier forever. Phoenix Force, there's a pretty good Phoenix Force deck out there. I think it belongs in the A tier. It's probably something similar to like the Shaw Surfer deck, is roughly where I would rank Phoenix Force right now. It's a fun deck. It can be a very flashy deck when its combo works well, but its combo is inconsistent, so it's not really more than a B+ or A- tier deck. Legion, I think that can move up, so we're really just moving Spider-Ham down the B tier, but not going to move Legion any higher than B tier. Dakin, I think, will move down the A tier. Dakin's not in that great a spot right now. I'd buy Shaw before Dakin. But we'll see when discard improves later in the month. Mirage, we're going to move down because Loki is getting nerfed tomorrow. Or Collector, the Loki deck is getting nerfed. Collector is getting nerfed, and I expect Loki to drop out of the meta. And because Collector's getting nerfed, Mirage is not going to be a highly recommended buy at all. We'll move Mirage down to the C tier. Not going to recommend anybody pick her up. Snowguard in a similar situation. I think Snowguard will drop down to low B, maybe high A. Kitty Pryde gonna drop down to C tier. I think I had Kitty Pryde too high before. She's not really worth picking up. Silk is featured in a pretty solid lockdown deck at the moment. I would move Silk up a little bit, but not a lot. We'll leave Silk there. Silk is a solid card. It's not seen that often, and kind of we really only see it in Storm decks, but it is a nice card in the Storm deck. It is a pretty important card. Ravonna Renslayer, been buffed to a 2/3, and she's going to move up to the S tier. It's a very solid card now, and featured in some pretty good decks, and as a cost reduction card, I do expect her to be featured in a lot of decks in the future, with her ability to discount low power cards, some of which are very good. Man-Thing, I think I had too high in my original ranking. He's going to drop down to the B tier. Don't really recommend Man-Thing. He's featured in a few control decks, and I think it's a solid card. I think he is underrated, but I think I overrated him in my original tier list. Darkhawk has been hit quite hard by the presence of Blob in the meta, and as long as Blob functions the way he currently functions, where he eats your entire deck, Darkhawk is going to remain a low priority card to buy. He's dropping down to the C, maybe low B tier. There is a mid B tier deck, we'll say, because there is a Darkhawk deck with Leech that does okay. But I would not say, I'd say he's better than Galactus, probably better than Echo, but we'll rank him below Mobius or Gladiator. Null still features prominently in a Destroy deck, but with Kyra in the meta, which hit Shang-Chi and Killmonger, which were important cards. Destroy decks, Killmonger very important, Shang-Chi less so, and not featured in every Destroy deck, but I do think Null is going to drop down in terms of his buying priority because Destroy has dropped out of the meta a bit. MODOK, we'll leave him where he is. Still think he's very solid in discard decks, which are not that prominent in the meta, but they're still okay. Zabu is going to remain where he is in the A tier. He is, I think I had him as an S tier card before in my previous tier list, but cost reduction cards are really never going to drop that far. He was primarily in the Darkhawk deck, and that's dropped out of the meta because of Blob, but he's still very good, and he's going to remain very good for as long as he can discount multiple cards. X-23 is going to drop down along with Null because this Destroy has dropped quite a bit because of Kyra. Nico is going to move up. I think I had Nico ranked a little bit too low, but let's put everything in the S tier that we're going to have in the S tier, and then I'll arrange the order later. Annihilus is getting nerfed tomorrow. I think Annihilus is going to remain an A tier card. Annihilus with Sentry is still going to be a very strong play. That's like 25 power for 9 cost. We'd like it to be 27 power, 3-1, to really be good, but it does consume one of your opponent's slots on their side of the board when it works. So Annihilus is still going to be pretty good, but Annihilus isn't that strong in the meta right now. It's below like Scar or Living Tribunal, so I don't really know why they're hitting Annihilus so hard, since I don't see Annihilus very often at the moment, but they are, and so Annihilus I think will be a fairly low priority buy, maybe something similar, or a little bit lower than discard, maybe even lower than Silk or Phoenix Force, or something similar to Sebastian Shaw or Dakin. Thanos, Eliath stays in the S tier. Loki, I think, is going to drop out of the S tier down to the B tier. With the Darkhawk, who's another nerfed card, I still think Loki will be playable, but with Collector getting nerfed, he definitely drops out of the must-buy category. Then we have Nebula, who's fine in the S tier. Iron Lad, fine. Jeff, fine. Blob, Werewolf by Night has dropped out of the meta quite a bit. Going to drop down to the B tier. With the other nerfed cards, I'd put him even lower than Galactus or Legion. You can go with Man-Thing or Spider-Ham. That's about where he is, and since he's a 4-4 now instead of a 3-3. Kyra, High Evolutionary, and then Miss Marvel is getting nerfed tomorrow. Not too hard though, so she's going to stay in the A tier. So let's arrange the final order. Top 5 cards in the game at the moment, I think, are High Evolutionary, Kyra, Jeff, Blob, Iron Lad, that looks pretty good. Then we have Nebula, Ravonna Renslayer, Eliath, I think. Thanos belongs in the top 5, I would say. Something like that looks pretty good for our rankings, with Miss Marvel coming in behind Eliath Renslayer. We have Nico, which is a very solid card, but I don't consider it that essential, and its best deck, which was Destroy, is not played very much. And then Black Knight, I think, belongs pretty high up as well. That looks pretty solid in terms of our S tier rankings. Then in the A tier, we got Living Tribunal, Scar, Zabu, Modok, Silk, Phoenix Force could go higher than Silk, Nihilus, Sebastian Shaw, and Dakin. And then in the B tier, Gladiator, Mobius, Darkhawk. There would be players who would argue for Gladiator in the A tier, but I just don't think it's an essential card. And against some decks, it can really lose you the game if you pull the wrong card. And then in the B tier, we've got some cards that have gotten hit relatively recently. Darkhawk, Loki, X-23 Null. Their decks have been nerfed. Werewolf's been nerfed. Man-Thing worse than I thought before. So this looks pretty good in terms of buying recommendation, buying order. High Evolutionary remains my top recommended buy because you really only need High Evolutionary for Series 4 and Series 5 cards to make Infinite. You could just buy High Evolutionary, and then if you have the Series 3 cards, climb all the way up to Infinite very easily. High Evolutionary is that good. There's no other card in the game that can provide that kind of one card power spike. Kyra, am I comfortable with Kyra as the second recommended buy? It's really, really good. But I think my second recommended buy would probably be Iron Lad, followed by Jeff, and then Kyra. Maybe even Thanos before Kyra. Drop her to number 5. Thanos, and then Blob, and then Kyra. That looks pretty good. And we got Black Knight, Nebula, Alioth, Ravonna Renslayer, Miss Marvel, and Nico. And Miss Marvel, probably a candidate to get hit again. I don't really think they got hit her enough. It's possible Miss Marvel drops down to the A tier, though. We got Nico, Living Tribunal, Scar, Zabu, Modok, Phoenix Force, Silk, and Alice, Sebastian Shaw, and Dakin. And anything after that I wouldn't really recommend spending tokens on until I've got all the essentials. So that looks pretty good as far as buying recommendations goes at the moment for January 9th, 2024, and these recommendations include the nerfs that are coming tomorrow. That's all for now, and thank you for watching.